What's up, summoners? King Blair here. Today we're going to be talking about all the banner heroes that are here right now, as well as the ones that are going to be coming in the next 2 weeks, so that you can better prepare your bookmarks and be ready for what you want to summon, and not be like me, where I just wasted all my covenants on Covenant banner because I was feeling the itch. But with that, let's get right into it. If you do like the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and Discord server, link down in the description. Without further ado, let's get right into it. As always, you guys know I like to do a short summary of all the heroes, as well as to where we are and the units that are coming. And then I go into depth of each of the heroes. I also do put bookmarks so you can skip around the video to the unit that you want to hear more about, or listen to all of them, the discussion for them. But without further ado, let's get right into it. So, as far what are the heroes that are going to be coming? Well, we have the last week of Laika bomb model, command model Laika. We also have Alencia banner rerun, and if you guys saw the mini patch review, this is on the Epic 7 official YouTube, which is where I get a lot of information. We are also going to be getting a Cermia banner, Cecilia banner, and we're also getting a rerun of a limited hero, Cerise, way later on in the future, in about 2 weeks, right? Is that 2 weeks? Yeah, in 2 weeks, right? So it's still in a long time, right? So Cerise is in 2 weeks. Next week will be Cermia and Cecilia, and this should give you a good idea. And this video will go over all those heroes. I will be talking about the Mystic Banner heroes separately, particularly the Violet, because I know some people are going to want to see mine, since that's one of the characters that they use a lot. But that is going to be what is coming. So now that we know that, let's kind of go a summary of each of them. First, I keep saying bomb model, but it's command model Laika. She's going to be kind of just a PvE type hero. She's mostly going to be there for PvE. She does have some PvP potential. I don't want to completely take her out. I actually do use mine occasionally from PvP for fun because I do like her design. But she's not a must-have unit, right? There are some one-shot hunts. There are some cool teams you can use in PvP with her and Archdemon's Shadow, her and Huge Damage Arby. Right? There's a lot of really cool teams that you can actually fit right into. But overall, it's not a must-have unit. I would personally skip if you're really low on bookmarks, especially because Cerise, you do want to copy a Cerise because she's going to be a limited. So Cerise is going to be a priority. I'm just going to say right now, she's going to be the one you're going to be pulling for. As far as Laika, you could honestly skip her and be okay. There are other units that can do her job in PvE. And at the same time, there are better units for PvP. Is she a bad unit? No, she's okay. If you really like how she looks, you can definitely make her work. So it's definitely something you can use for Katie's. I know some people have some other cool one-shots. You can definitely work for Banshee if you want her to, since she does give immunity. So that she definitely has potential for PvE. It's just a lot of the times you use other heroes. But again, giving attack buff and dual attacking is really nice, especially with the new Commander Lorena for PvE. And for PvP, as I mentioned, Archdemon's Shadow. That one is going to be Alencia, and Alencia has really fallen out of the meta. She doesn't really see almost any play. I can't think of anyone that's actually using her right now. There's just better strippers. There's better bruisers. So Alencia's kind of in a weird spot where she has a really cool kit, and she used to be one of the best units in the game, but she's just gotten power crept, and there's just better heroes that are doing more than her. As a bruiser, she's not doing enough. Even though she did recently get her EE, it's not doing a lot. Can you use her for fun? Yes. Would I recommend you pull for her? If it was 2 years ago, yes. Now you could honestly skip. I don't think I've seen an Alencia a single time this entire season. She might come back in the future if she gets another buff or something like that, but as of right now, even with the EE, she's a little unreliable, and we'll talk more about that when we go into detail. Now, as for the other two, they're also going to be primarily going to be Cermia, not so much, but Cecilia, again, Cecilia's another hero that has a really cool kit in theory, but doesn't really have a place where she shines. So again, she's going to be another skip. Her S1 is going to do decrease. Her S1 does decrease defense, and when the decreases with decreased attack, you also do has a chance. You had a higher chance to actually land the other one. I don't know why the decreased attack is showing up here, because I'm pretty sure S1 doesn't have a decreased attack. Oh, if they're suffering decreased attack, you have a higher chance. Okay, that's what it was. It's not bad for Earth Expedition, and you can use her there. She's kind of fun for PvP as well, because she does have an AoE skill that provokes. But overall, not really a lot of slots to use her. She just gets out united by a lot of other knights in the game and a lot of other heroes. Can you use her? Again, yes. She's not like completely worthless. She has some really cool stuff with the S2 being able to dispel and apply attack break, the S3 being able to give immunity and provoke, and the S1 being able to decrease defense decently reliably. So she's okay for PvE, but overall, not the greatest thing in the planet. You can probably skip her. And then, of course, the fourth one is going to be none other than Cermia. Now, Cermia is a unit that if Cerise wasn't there, I would consider her. She is going to be one of the best single target DPS units for PvE. And she actually has really good presence in Guild Wars because of her S3 being able to take out basically any unit that you want if you build her right with the right heroes. Not used as often for Guild Wars as she used to be, but I do know a lot of people that do really like her. But she's extremely good for a lot of PvE content. She does have competition now with Commander Lorena. Commander Lorena is kind of taking over the roles that Cermia used to do, but Cermia just still does some insane damage with this S3. I still use her for KDs. I still use her for a lot of PvE content because her EE equip allows her to attack 2 times with the S1, allowing you to do pretty high amounts of damage, especially against bosses that stop you from doing damage based on health, where Commander Lorena shines. She doesn't have that restriction. She's just able to do a lot of damage all the time, since her S3 is able to penetrate defense by quite a lot, and you're able to reset that, give yourself gap, get an extra turn, and hit with a pretty big skill. Right, so very solid PvE unit. Again, could consider pulling for her. She's one of the best for things like Hall of Trials, but in most of the other content there are replacements to her, right? So I will tell you that in most other content there are replacements to her. In Hall of Trials, she's one of the best ones, I will say that. So she's definitely a good PvE unit, so if you like her, definitely a good option. And then of course the last one, the one that you're most likely saving for, is going to be none other than Cerise. And this unit, even though she's starting to fall off a little bit for PvP, she's still incredibly good for PvE, as well as her artifact. Her S1 gives her combat readiness when she uses it, and will also trigger a dual attack when her S3 is on cooldown, which is what makes her such a good PvE unit. And if you give her own artifact, she will also be able to decrease defense, which is why she's often used in expeditions and in a lot of different content, primarily expeditions. The S3 for PvP can set up into things like Challenger Dominial if you have a full crit one, can also set up into things like Samurai Seria, and can just control the pace of the game. I still see people that like cleaving with Cerise, just because she does combo off really good with Samurai Seria and can combo into different types of cleaves, as well as she gets invincibility and gets decreased speed and restrict, which again, these two are really good for bosses, especially for the Dark Expedition boss. The speed down is really nice. And then of course the S2 is a stun and cannot be buffed, which makes her really good for the light expedition, as well as some other stray PvE content that sometimes pops up, like the 2-week side story that we get, the admin side story. She's really good for that. She's really good in a lot of PvE. I mostly use her for PvE, but she can also work for PvP as a setup type unit. Guild Wars not so much, but again, overall, a lot of units you can honestly skip, and a lot of the heroes are going to be heroes that are just kind of okay, right? So I know that was a lot, and I could honestly end the video right there and give you all the information that you need. But I'm going to go into detail with all of them, so this video is going to be a 30-minute plus video. So now let's actually go through each of their kits, starting with Laika, because she's the new one and I actually have not talked about her. So starting off with Laika, if I can find her. She's a 5-star Earth Ranger, right? There she is. So Laika, she does get effectiveness from her Awakening. And her base stats are going to be kind of just okay, right? She's not particularly like super fast. She's like okay speed. She has no help on crit rate. She has decent attack. Like surprisingly, the attack is really high for a ranger that's supposed to be landing debuffs. Pretty decent HP and defense for a ranger. This is pretty standard stat line. And then the effectiveness, pretty good for what she wants to do. She does want to be landing those debuffs, right? So it's a little bit of a weird stat line because she kind of looks like she wants to do attack, but she's also a support unit. So it's a little odd. I do know some people actually do give her damage and they have had relative success, but she does get a lot of help from effectiveness to be able to land the debuffs. And now as far as her actual kit, this one is actually really basic. It's the same one as Mediator Cowards, where it just increases the combat readiness of yourself and an ally by 15%. This does let you cycle out herself, so she's inherently faster because you're cycling herself out with the S1, as well as you're cycling an ally out with the S1. There are a couple of cool ranger artifacts that can make you attack twice with the skill, like the Laika artifact. I can't think on the top of my head what the name of it is, but you can do some stuff to try to cheese some extra combat readiness if you do proc that. But overall, nothing crazy. Pretty basic S1. The S2 is where you get some of the spice and why she's used a lot in one-shot comps for hunts, and has a lot of potential in PvE. It's primarily going to be this skill. What this skill does is it's going to apply a target debuff, which again is really nice, and it's going to increase attack of your highest attack ally, and then it's going to dual attack with them. It's actually a lot. This is arguably her best kill in her kit, and it's on a 3-turn cooldown because it allows you to essentially apply a target debuff, so you're going to be more reliably hitting on the enemy, as well as pulling your highest attack ally along with you doing like a pretty good amount of damage, right? And for PvE, this is really good because you're putting like you're pulling a Lorena, right? So you're doing that extra as 1 damage and can do quite a lot of damage. In PvP, you can pull an Arch Demon Mercedes, you can pull a Milim, and not only are you pulling them in for a dual attack, you also just gave them attack buff. So that's going to be pretty nice, right? It does have a lot of uses in both PvE and PvP, and if you're using her, you're primarily using her for this skill, right? This is going to be her bread and butter and what actually makes her a really solid unit. And then of course the S3 is going to be an AoE attack that attacks all enemies, decreases speed. This is nice for PvE. Again, bosses with decreased speed does allow you to cycle them faster, which allows you to get to more S2s before you actually have to heal or anything like that, right? And it allows you to be more aggressive, and it also gives you immunity, which actually does go up a long way, and it has a chance to sleep for 1 turn up to, I believe, 75%. Yeah, 75% chance to land sleep. Not super reliable. Every time I use her, she misses this debuff, but again, it's not terrible. It does give you immunity, right? I don't know how her damage ratio on this. I've never seen anyone cleave with her, though. She's going to be there for the support. If you're using her, like I mentioned, you're using her for this S2 to pull something like an Archdemon's Shadow, a Mercedes, an Harbinger Vildred, any high single target damage dealing unit that you want to give attack buff and you want to pull in for a dual attack, you would open with that. And then you would do your S3 on the follow-up turns and hopefully try to land some decreased speed, some sleeps to give you some more tempo in the fight, right? I do know Shuffles really likes her. He's an RTA Twitch streamer, so if you want to check her out more, I highly suggest checking out Shuffles because he does force her a lot and he has relative success with her. So it's definitely something you can use. As I mentioned, she can be good for PvE because of that pull. For Katie's, Commander Lorena and her for PvE are incredibly good. Again, because Commander Lorena does damage based on the boss's health. She gets a target debuff, and you're pulling her in, and you're giving attack buff. It does allow you to do quite a lot of damage to some bosses. So again, not a bad unit, right? She's not bad. It's just there are other options out there available for you. So unless you really like the design, I really like the design, which is why I pulled for her. But if you don't really like the design, there's definitely something you can skip, right? It's not the end of the world if you don't actually get her. But now the other one is going to be Alencia. Again, I'm going to try to go a little bit faster than normal through these because I don't want to spend all day talking about them. But for this one, you're going to be getting crit hit chance, so she will have higher crit hit chance from this. And just so you know, this one will give her a higher chance of activating her passive. This will increase the damage of her S2 passive, and this will give her effectiveness when using Genesis. I think it's during, so I'm not quite sure exactly what it's going to be. And then as far as the stats, she's going to be a pretty standard bruiser. Not the highest attack out there, but she doesn't scale for attack, so she doesn't particularly need it. Really solid HP, over 7,000. Not so bad speed for a bruiser, 106. Solid defense at 652. No help on crit rate, no help on effectiveness, no help on everything else, right? So she's going to be primarily stacking the HP and defense. I think this is the same stat line as Robbie, right? But she doesn't need the attack because she does scale with HP. And of course, the imprint will give her more HP, and because her skill off of HP, you are going to be doing more damage. And again, as we mentioned, she does get this extra crit from this, allowing her to, you know, help a little bit with the actual build. As far as her kit, again, it's a little bit basic because she's a bit of an older unit. The S1 is going to have a chance to decrease defense up to 75%. If you soul burn it, it goes up to 100%, and the decreased defense goes up to 2 turns. It looks pretty basic, but the second part I can't show you I can't show it to you in this part. But when she gets her passive, it's going to be Mind's Eye. If you have Mind's Eye, you have a 50% chance to actually trigger this when it's maxed out. Or if you're using the EE, it's 70%. And that's one of the problems with Alencia, is she has to get hit for her to get the most damage, right? And that's honestly one of the biggest things that actually stops her from doing a lot better. But if you do get it, it is pretty nice. Mind's Eye does give you higher effectiveness than FRES. Not that it matters too much, but the big thing is going to be that you get this extra trample skill that is going to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate, as well as giving you an extra attack. So she used to be a single target dealing monster back in the day because you will land the decreased defense and go immediately into trample. And the trample does really good damage, right? It's a really hard hitting skill. But in today's day and age, in the days of things like a Robbie, it doesn't do that much damage, right? Yes, the decreased defense is nice, but this is not as reliable as something like an A Robbie that can just slam an S3 for 1,000,000 damage, right? So again, she is outshined by a lot of bruisers, and this is not that reliable. And of course, the S3 is going to be an AoE increased defense, which is nice, and an AoE strip. Basic, but still pretty solid. There's not, well, there used to not be many strippers in the game, but I don't think there's any stripper that does what she does, where she actually gives increased defense, right? So she's kind of like a slow bruiser, where you would let your opponent set up. So if you're thinking of something like Mediator Cowrick, right? You would let your Mediator Cowrick enemy set up all his buffs, and then you would come in and you're like, oh, nice buffs. You would scream at him, and you set up the increased defense and strip all the buffs, right? So it's a slow stripper. When the meta used to be slower, she used to be pretty good, but right now she's simply too slow. She has no sustain, she has no self CR push, as you guys saw. She has to get hit in order to get her passive, and her damage is not higher than other bruisers that are currently meta, which makes her just an okay unit, and she really doesn't have any PvE uses, right? So overall, even though I love Alencia in the story, I'm not going to spoil it, but she's one of my favorite characters from the Season 3 storyline. Definitely love that storyline, but again, yeah, Alencia. Yeah. She's not great. I would honestly skip her. She's nowhere near what she used to be in the past. But now that is going to bring us to Cecilia, which is another one from Season 3, which I always have wanted to use because she looks so cool. But it's always either too hard to use her, because back then she used to be pretty good, or it's just really hard to slot her in. She's going to get effectiveness from her EE, as well as getting a higher chance to decrease defense, or a chance to decrease speed with the S2. Or a chance to apply unhealable, right, on the S2. And we'll go into detail more what that means. She's going to be a knight, so she does have access to Elris, has access to Aureus, has access to Adamant Shield, all those good knight artifacts. And her stat line, for a knight, she actually has really good speed. 110 speed is very solid. Really solid HP, really solid defense, and does have some effectiveness. I believe she actually shares stats with Belian. Right now, now I'm looking at it, I think this is the same as Belian's stat line. It's a pretty solid stat line, and her awakening is going to give her more health, making her a little bit bulkier. But let's actually look at the kit and what she's capable of doing. The S1, again, is going to be pretty basic, but it has a chance to decrease defense, 50% chance. If they're attack broken, it's another 25% chance. If you have the EE, it goes up to 85, I believe. Right? So again, single target, 2-turn decrease defense. Can be nice for things like Earth Expedition, because she's a far knight. She can actually tank the Earth Expedition, and she can actually let those decrease defense. And here and there are some bosses we can actually bring her in. The S2 is going to be, again, just an AoE attack that's going to decrease attack for 2 turns. The problem with this skill is that the decrease attack comes before you dispel 1 buff. So if your opponent has immunity, this skill does nothing. That is arguably one of the things that they did her really dirty with back when strips weren't as big as they are now, where strips used to be far and few between. They kind of nerfed it that way. This one, it strips after the attack break, which means that they have immunity. Again, it is absolutely useless. That speed down, that unhealable, it's not going to be landing because, again, the strip comes after. And if there's a fall on Cecilia, you're not ever getting this because it's only 1 buff. That really does hurt her. And then the S3 is an AoE attack that provokes for 1 turn and gives immunity, as well as giving herself a barrier to help her survive a little bit longer. And the damage is going to be based on your max health. So again, very basic knight, but doesn't do anything that other knights and other heroes don't do. She doesn't shine in any way, right? There's no scenario where I'm like, yes, I would really like a Cecilia here, aside from the fact that she does provide immunity. But again, you could just use someone like Last Croft for that, right? So overall, even though she looks amazing and she does have a really cool skin, you can honestly, again, skip this character. Not a lot to her, very hard to use, not a lot of places to actually slot her in. As much as I like her, it's really hard to actually use her. So now that brings us over to Cermia, who's going to have some really good EEs and a really good stat line. She's going to have really high base attack, really solid crit rate. They gave her amazing offensive stat lines, and her defensive stat lines are not even that bad, right? All in all, and a little bit slower on the speed, 105, not the greatest out there. And she's going to get even more attack from her awakening. She also does get even more attack from her EE, which does give her some really high attack base, right? Just because of all the things she's able to have. The EEs are also really good, and I'll try to bring them up when I talk with them about the skills. But the S1 is going to give her another chance to attack with the S1. Every time you use your S1, you have a 25% chance to use it again. The other one is that if you kill an enemy, you get to reset your S2. And the S3 is going... Oh, the S3 is going to be this one. The S3 lets you reset your S2, which essentially just lets you reset your S3. Because your S2 resets your S3. And the S2 gives you a barrier according to your health when you use it. So now as far as skills and why she is so good at PvE as well as for other content, well, she has really good ratios and she gives herself gab, right? It's the best attack buff in the game. So normally what you're able to do with her, let's just go skill by skill. First skill, nothing crazy. Applies unhealable, but it does really good single target damage, right? So unhealable, really high single target damage, 25% chance for you to trigger this again. Right, so if you're triggering this S1, even if it's off a dual attack, this will happen. So you use Lilius and you pull your Cermia, and you do your Cermia and she pulls in the Cermia, you're doing 2 hits. Yeah, we had the 25% chance for that to happen, which is a lot of single target damage, right? So again, really solid single target damage, as we mentioned, really high attack. The other one is going to be the S2, which is going to give her greater attack buff and will also reset your S3 cooldown. So again, you get an extra turn, which lets you set up into your big S3 attack. And the S3 attack is going to be just full damage, penetrate difference by 50%, and you're able to soul burn it for even higher damage. You can just do dummy damage with this, right? And what's really cool, for Guild Wars, if this skills, it resets this skill, and this skill resets this skill. So essentially for Guild Wars, you have a unit that as long as you can cycle her, she's able to just do like 24k, 28k, depending on how you build her and who you're pairing her up with, every single time on the enemy, and you're just recycling that S2, S3, S2, S3. I do still see some people in our guild use her every single Guild Wars, right? So definitely a really fun Guild Wars hero if you were in need of one. But yeah, very, very solid. And then of course, the S3, as we talked, damage, right? So it's all damage, right? That's what all this here is. Often you will see her pair with something like Oxlots, right? Because Oxlots or Amelia, right? Because they'll push her up, they'll heal her, they'll tank, and then she'll come up, and then she'll just one-shot something, and then you just cycle her again, and then she comes, and then she'll one-shot something. Very, very cool. For PvE, again, you can pull her in. For attacks, I use her for Katie's because she has a non-attack skill. You can also use it for Dark Expedition. So there's a lot of content you can actually use to Cermia. So out of all the heroes we talked about, she actually has a place. So you really like her. Her and Laika are the ones that you could pull for. But that's going to bring us to the last one, who is going to be none other than Cerise, who is the hero that you are most likely going to be saving for. A big part of it because she's limited, right? So she's going to be a limited hero. You won't get another chance likely for another year, right? So you definitely want to try to pull for her now, because if you get her, you're going to have a limited hero, and you never know how the meta changes or what heroes are going to come out that pair off really good with her, as well as her just being a really solid PvE hero, right? So as far as stat lines, she's going to be very high on the speed side at a solid 122. For a ranger, really high crit rate, which again does let you set up into a challenger dominion in a cleave. Because it's so easy to give her the high crit, all you have to give her is a crit neck, and you're basically almost at 100% crit rate. And her defensive stats are actually not even that bad, right? So she actually does do a pretty good poke damage. So very, very solid stat line overall. For a ranger, it's one of the better stat lines, right? She does not get any help from effectiveness, which she does land a lot of debuffs, so you will have to supplement that. But again, she can get it from the awakenings if you do happen to pull a dupe. But with that, let's actually look at the skills. So the S1 is going to be, again, quite basic. But really, really good. It gives her combat readiness 15%, which again makes her feel faster than she really is, because she starts every round at 85% when she's doing the S1s. And if your S3 is on cooldown, you will also be pulling in for a dual attack. What makes this really, really good is that it's a single target damage skill, and when you pair her up with it's not her artifact. I'm sorry if I missaid that. Not her artifact. If you put her with Elfhelt's artifact, you're actually able to land decreased defenses with the S1. Without it, it's a little bit harder, but there are things you can do with her. But the biggest one's going to be Miss Confile. I am so sorry. I feel like it should be her artifact because it just goes so well with her. Confile is going to be the big one. For PvE, it is going to be the Sachet Thane. That's going to give you CR bar whenever you kill. But PvE-wise, it is going to be the Sachet Thanes. Or not Sachet Thane, it's going to be the Miss Confile. If you don't have Miss Confile, you can also use Song of Stars so that you're able to land more target, right? So at least you're able to land a debuff. So that's not too bad. But again, solid S1. With Confile, it is really solid. The S2 is going to give you a stun and unable to be buffed. Again, really good for light expedition. And for PvP, if they don't have immunity, you're able to punish that and just stun someone. People used to really run immunity because of Cerise, just because of how threatening her S2 was, because she had such a high base speed, right? So it's almost like you had to run it. And then of course, we have the S3, was going to be an AoE attack that reduces speed and applies restrict, as well as giving herself invincibility. This skill is going to give you advantageous element, which means you're going to have an extra 15% crit, right? Because you're attacking with the advantageous element, right? So that always will give you the extra 15% crit rate, which is always really, really nice, and it will make it so you won't miss against Earth heroes, right? So that's really solid. And again, speed down, really, really good. Restrict, really good as well. So people can't cut you in like a G-Perk, a Sage Ball. You apply that restrict, they're not moving anywhere. You're able to easily cleave. So again, where you would use her pretty much is going to be primarily for PvE. She's really good for Dark Expedition, really good for Light Expedition. Those are the big two that she's used for. She's really good in some Abyss stages. She also can work for raid. And again, for PvP with Challenger Dominial, she's incredibly good. And with Samurai Seria as well. So those two are usually her pair ups. Very solid unit, and she is limited, so you do want to pull for her. And because I showed the wrong artifact, I do apologize for that. I'm actually going to show it here so you actually guys know. As far as Cerise, Guiding Light is a really good artifact, but that's not the one that she usually uses. The one that she uses is going to be none other than Miss Confile, which is not a limited artifact. It kind of sucks. It's such a good one. I wish it was like more accessible to a lot more people. But this is the one that you'll ideally want to use. If you don't have that, Son of Star works fine because you're still landing that target debuff, which again, it does give you a little bit more damage. And you also have things like for PvP, you have Sachet Thanes, which does give you CR when something dies, right? So, pretty nice. Not bad. Really solid heroes. So, all in all, if you just want another conclusion summary of everything, Cerise definitely have resources to pull for her. She's a good unit and she's limited. You want to have her. All the other ones, it is 100% up to you. It is what you want this to be, and it is what you want to do with your thing. But that is going to be all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Peace.